Well, here we go. It's Thursday. How we doing? We're getting there, right? We're getting there. Just a little housekeeping stuff here. Tomorrow, is like a Flex Friday, but you'll start the day off with. Do you have embedded health? I think embedded health tomorrow for you. Is that you have no idea? Well, see, I know we have an advisory, and I probably shouldn't have got rid of. Here I'm thinking I know what I'm talking about. Here we go. Let's see, advisory. They can't see it at home, but okay, that's seniors. Yeah, there we go. Is that tomorrow? Oh, but that's in the afternoon, right? Embedded health in the afternoon? Or am I just adding more confusion? Probably adding more confusion. All right, so tomorrow, we know for sure tomorrow is Flex Friday. There we go. And I will go live second hour. All right, so you want to make sure that you pay attention to the class schedule and for Flex Friday and make sure you tune in. All right. So that's what we have there. Here, I thought I had my ducks in a row on that one. All right. So with that, I do want to spotlight Black history and then focus on the human impact of the Second World War. And I have a little clip here that in a moment we'll watch about Made into an Enemy. So it's going to reference Japanese internment and then give you some time to work on this summative piece. I did send out a note earlier or an update earlier about missing work. And so if you are missing work, let's get that taken care of by next Wednesday. And if you somehow can't meet that deadline, please reach out to me and we'll talk about it. And we'll see if we'll come up with a game plan. Okay? So with that, for this today, for Black history, I want to take a look at Leonard Bates and the Bates 7 here. And in 1930s to 1940s, many colleges in the North allowed African Americans to participate in extracurricular activities, athletics as well. But many Southern colleges continue to be racially segregated. And so in many cases, because of that, that had contributed to the historically Black colleges and universities there. There was, though, a gentleman's agreement. Northern schools quietly agreed Black athletes would not play on segregated university fields. All right, and so that would mean if a Northern school was going down into the South to play, that Black athletes wouldn't be allowed to participate. Bates was held out of a game versus Missouri, and Bates is from New York University here. And so the chancellor at New York University said historic traditions and attitudes, which go back far beyond our own generation, are responsible for segregation. Any attempt to change them overnight simply sets back the whole situation. So one could look at that and have a number of interpretations about what is the chancellor getting at. Is the chancellor being compliant or making a statement that it's wrong, but now what are you going to do? One response was with a call to cancel this and other Jim Crow games, stating that we are not trying to impose our views on other institutions, but that by continuing to play them on their terms, we do nothing but sanction and give tacit approval, there we go, to intolerance and bigotry. So basically, the idea is if you continue to follow the status quo, you're only allowing it to continue to exist and not fully addressing it. So Leonard Bates, if we look at this becoming bigger here, 2,000 students protested, 4,000 plus signatures on the petition. That usually is the standard mode, grassroots approach here. Bates did not, though, make the trip to Missouri, and New York University would go on to lose 33-0. So New York University did comply with not allowing Bates to play. So afterwards, when you look at here, you know, when we talk about the Bates 7, the people that are behind the Bates 7, there's their names there. We may not necessarily remember who they are, but the fact is this becomes a very important moment to work towards breaking down that gentleman's agreement. Led a student movement against New York University's perceived compliance with Jim Crow segregation in the South, underwent a controversial set of disciplinary hearings, and were ultimately suspended for circulating a petition without proper permission from the university. So again, you know, we have the constitutional rights and all that stuff. They're looking at technicalities. In 2001, though, decades after the event, New York University reaches out to make amends for their actions of the administration in 1941, so 60 years later, paying tribute to the Bates 7, who stood up against racial discrimination 2 decades before the civil rights movement. So again, if anything that we've looked at this month so far with some of the individuals in the groups that Messiah and I have spotlighted, that the civil rights movement that we think of, the 50s and the 60s, in many ways, it's already going on. So we can look at different phases of the civil rights movement. Probably be a more appropriate way to look at it. Now, the University of Minnesota, when we look at football, it will be not really until the 1960s, about 1960, will the University of Minnesota begin to give scholarships to African-American football players. And it would be one of the first Big Ten universities to do that. So the Bates 7, it probably could have contributed to the Bates 7 in influencing the University of Minnesota to do what it did. Okay. Any questions on the Bates 7? All right. So I have a video clip here, and I would like you to dial it in and watch it. And it is about Japanese internment. Okay, and so let's just take a moment and step away from our human impact activity working on that, because we'll have plenty of time here. So again, when we look at Japanese internment, here the United States is purposefully focusing on a group. Now in this war, the United States is fighting against who? Let's talk about that. Who is the United States fighting against?
The Axis powers.
All right, let's start with who makes up the Axis powers. Who makes up the Axis powers? Anyone at home or here? What do we think?
And Germany, Italy.
Yes. All right, those are the big 3. And there will be some other groups that also become allies of the Axis powers as well. But Japan, Italy, and Germany are who we're going up against. Now, if you think of the United States, do we have people of descent of all 3 of those nations living in the United States? Yo, absolutely. That's a big yes. Absolutely. Again, if I think on my mom's side of the family, they're 100% German, and I usually kid. It all depends on what flavor, though. They're Swiss, Austrian, and German. All right, but they're all German descent. All right, so there's that example, and we definitely there's some big, well-known Italian American families, and then we have Japanese Americans as well, and we have Japanese aliens, German aliens, and Italian aliens living in the United States, but the Japanese Americans are being signaled out. All right, and so here we look at and an event where sometimes when we look at, and this was a discussion that I had in my first hour, was we know that how horrific the Japanese and the Germans may have treated individuals, as well as the Italians, have treated in their conquered territories. Germans associated, Nazi Germany associated with the Holocaust. In Japan, extensively use of slave labor. The Italians, in terms of their race policies and actions dealing with territories that they have conquered in Africa. So, but then the Allies themselves have also committed some atrocities, and some can put this in this category. So this little video clip here, about 7 minutes, is going to analyze. So I want us to watch this, analyze, and think of like some takeaways that you get from this little clip about Japanese internment. Okay, and then we can talk a little bit about that because I have some talking points to go with that. So here we go. Let me first mute my mic.
I went to Seattle in 1942. One memory is very clear and strong. It's a Saturday, and I'm taking a bus into the center of town and across the public square in front of the town hall, I guess it is. And I see ahead of me a line of people standing patiently by a bus stop. And as I approach, I see that they're all Japanese, and that they're getting onto buses. And I realize that these are the Japanese American citizens of Seattle and the neighborhood who are being sent off to what amounted to a concentration camp. And I think, well, those are my enemies. But they don't look like enemies standing there in their American clothes with their cardboard suitcases, waiting to be sent off into the desert.
On February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt had signed Executive Order 9066. Its tone was carefully neutral. It authorized the War Department to designate military areas and then exclude anyone from them whom it felt to be a danger. But it had a specific target. The more than 110,000 people of Japanese ancestry living along the West Coast. They were about to be forced from their homes and moved inland. Thousands of German and Italian aliens were also locked up. But millions of German and Italian American citizens remained free to live their lives as they always had. Only Japanese Americans on the West Coast were singled out. A Jap's a Jap, said General John L. DeWitt of the West Coast Defense Command. It makes no difference whether he's an American citizen or not. I don't want any of them. Almost no one protested the government's plan, which also classified all Japanese Americans as unfit for military service.
1A is physically fit, 4F, something's wrong with you. But 4C means enemy alien, and here I was, 17 years of age. I considered myself a good American, but made into an enemy.
In Sacramento, soon after Order 9066 was issued, hand-lettered signs went up all over town saying, "Japs must go." The orders to leave arrived in May. Susumu Sato and his family could scarcely believe it. They were given 1 week's notice.
It was middle of harvest, but still, yeah, we had to abandon it and leave. And so, of course, we made arrangement with our friends. Hey, come and pick the strawberries because it's ready to be marketed. And so I imagine they did that.
There was an area of town here in Sacramento that was mostly where the Japanese lived, and it was empty almost overnight. And we wondered, what happened. They took somebody out of 8th grade, a Japanese boy who did wonderful cartoons. His name was Sammy. And one day he was there, and the next day he was gone. And that was very difficult for us to understand because we didn't see Sammy or any Japanese, at least I didn't, any Japanese American as the enemy.
We were allowed to bring whatever you could carry. That's it. And so you put just essentials in your suitcase. First day when we had to pack up our thing and go to the train, I really wondered what's going to happen to us. That this is just the beginning, and they may very well send us back to Japan. And that to me was horrible. I, in my heart, knew my loyalty belongs to America. I went to school, pledged allegiance every morning in grammar school and so forth. And for me to think that I may be sent to Japan was horrendous.
Asako Takuno was still a freshman at Berkeley that spring. Her parents and her grandfather were evacuated first because they had been born in Japan. She and her sister were left behind for a time to close the family flower business.
We all somehow gathered the flowers, bunched them, and got them to the market, to the flower market in San Francisco. And so we were able to keep the business going. And all those flowers didn't go to waste. They're just in their height of their beauty at that time of the year, getting ready for Easter and all the holidays. We were really kind of caught in the middle when the war happened, although no question about our loyalty to our country, and how we felt. This is our country, and when this whole evacuation thing happened, everything was like we had no country, because we weren't from Japan, and they took away our rights, actually. We couldn't protest, and we went to protest it because we had to do what the government told us to do. And so I think our parents realized, of course, they were, not citizens, so they accepted the whole thing. For us, I think it was a lot harder, the fact that we had no rights.
All right. So any immediate takeaways or any thoughts, things that need to get clarified or reactions, just to that little clip on Japanese internment? So if we look at Japanese internment, which Japanese Americans and aliens were impacted by it? Did you pick up on where? The West Coast. So those that are living in other parts of the United States, so the central part, or on the East Coast, or even in Hawaii, they're not going to be sent to the internment camps. They'll be monitored, but the largest percentage, if we look at, it was on the West Coast. And so when that area was designated by that executive order as a strategic defensive area, Order 9066, it that seemed to be where the largest density was. So they're the ones that are going to be impacted by it. And so when you look at the Japanese internment camps, there was no distinction, was there? It was you could have been born here, and we know if you're born here, you're considered an American citizen. And those who were aliens, there was no distinction. They were all shipped off to the internment camps. And then you have Daniel Inouye, who talked about how he was being categorized. And so categorized to a point where he's not fit for military service. That will change, though. They will change that status because then eventually he does go on and serve in the U.S. military. But just like African Americans who are serving in segregated units, so are Japanese Americans are going to be serving in segregated units, Nisei units, and many of them will go on and have tremendous success in the war itself. But again, why are we going after the Japanese Americans? What's the view? What's that? Okay, they're viewed as a threat. I mean, we look at who attacked the United States, Japan, all right? But we are at war against Germany and Italy, but we are signaling more at Japanese Americans. Did we also incarcerate Italian and Germans? Did we put them in camps? Yep, a little bit, just a small percentage were actually put into camps. And where were these camps or detention centers? It's interesting, use of terms as well. We call our camps internment camps. Others might want to refer to them as concentration camps. But if we use that word concentration camp, what comes to mind? Or maybe nothing comes to mind. We immediately start thinking about the concentration camps of Germany and how Jews and others that were in the category called Untermensch were being treated. So internment, I don't know, does internment sound a little bit softer in a word than concentration? I think so. I think it does. And intern might mean not forever, possibly. All right. But they're going to be located in some of the isolated spots in the United States. So if we think about isolated spots in the United States, let's put them out west in the desert, mountainous regions, away from people so they can be easily monitored. And so we also look at the Italian, the German camps in some of these isolated spots as well. So after the war, some are going to be deported out of the United States, whether they are Italian, German, and Japanese. Some are definitely going to. And there are some loyalty questionnaires that will be given to them that will ultimately become perhaps part of the reasons why they are being deported, like swearing or one was about the Japanese emperor and how you answered that question. And the thing is, for many, if the father would refuse to answer some of the questions, that had implications throughout the entire family. So there are some Japanese Americans who, after this war, because of how their parents respond to some of the questionnaires, would be sent back to Japan, and they've never been in Japan at all. That is, a shock to the system right there. But in 1988, the United States is going to pass a Civil Rights Act that is an apology for what the United States had done during this war. Internment will be from 1942 to 1945. And then there's going to be some compensation as well, because many of them had to give up their homes and businesses, and they lost just about everything. So those survivors, not descendants, but survivors of the Japanese internment camps, if they were still around in 1989, got some money. So we might have heard today about ideas of reparations being thrown out and referencing to our days of slavery in the United States. Here are examples of arguments that can be used for reparations. The United States has apologized at times, have given monetary funds out there to certain groups, whether in this case was for Japanese Americans, indigenous people as well, and reparations could even for indigenous people come back with returning land to indigenous people. So expect in the next coming years the idea of reparations and how that might look, and look at examples that would give their case some credit. Got that piece up there. My last thought here is my great grandparents. They had passed away before I was born, but my great grandparents, Gustav Meyer and Mary Meyer, in 1943, their status of aliens, their alien status changed to U.S. citizens, naturalized U.S. citizens. They were German, as I previously had said, that they were of German descent. Gustav was Swiss, Mary was German. The war prompted their naturalization. Show that they are loyal and that this is their new country. At least that's what my aunt had shared with us about my great grandparents with that. So war is causing groups and people to do things that they may not have considered to do. So there's that little piece. All right, your activity here. Okay, and I know some are working very hard on it. This activity, it's going to be due Monday, March 1st, and it's about human impact of war. There is, I did attach a link to this, and I think it's a good link because it'll lead you to some other additional resources. This was put together by our media specialists a little while ago. So I would really look at that if you're looking for additional information, but also on the assignment itself, we have put a lot of resources there as well that you can use. So you are to focus on 2 groups, and you can work with a historical buddy. This is what your finished product should look like. Do we have any questions or concerns right now? Some things that are roadblocks that need to be clarified at this point? We understand what we need to get at. All right, it looks like we know what our task is. Okay, so with that then, those are at home, you can continue, stay on the Google Meet or exit and have a great day. Those here in the building, continue to work on this and seek me out if we have questions. All right.